Hey guys, in today's video we are stepping into a city that looks glamorous on the surface but is trembling underneath. Picture the wide boulevards of Paris in summer 1940. Horse-drawn carts bump along beside German armoured vehicles, shop windows glisten in the morning sun, and overhead the tricolour flags are being lowered, replaced by swastikas that hang heavy against the pale stone of government buildings. You are here now, and the odds aren't exactly in your favour. Before you fall asleep, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if stories from deep inside World War II are your kind of thing. Let me know in the comments what city you're tuning in from and what time it is. It always amazes me how far these slow, dusty stories manage to march. Now get comfortable, let your mind slow down. We're stepping into another time, no headlines, just the quiet moments that shaped a generation. The clatter of boots on cobblestones fills your ears as you stand on the corner near the Arc de Triomphe. The Germans have arrived. The fall of France came far faster than most Parisians imagined possible, and now you are swept into the current of spectators watching the procession. The Wehrmacht parades with machine-like precision, helmets gleaming, bayonets catching glints of sun. Some say the army moved with such speed in May and June 1940 that even the generals were surprised. Others insist France's political turmoil and unpreparedness sealed the city's fate. The truth? Depends who you ask. From your position, the Champs-Élysées seems longer than ever, stretching like a stage for conquerors. Locals gather silently. Some avert their gaze. Others, especially the young, cannot help but stare. The elderly mutter about 1871, about the Prussians marching in the same streets, as if history repeats itself with cruel rhythm. You try to imagine what went through the mind of Marshal Pétain, the war hero of Verdun, now calling for an armistice. Some call him saviour, others traitor. The scholars still argue, did he preserve French lives by yielding, or did he hand the nation's dignity to the invader? You shuffle as more German vehicles grind past, motorcycles buzzing like metallic hornets. Children peek from behind skirts, their eyes wide. A woman clutching a basket of bread squeezes your arm and whispers, "At least the guns are silent." You want to believe her, but already the silence feels heavy. A silence that belongs to the victor. The city changes before your eyes. Soldiers mark buildings with chalk, requisitioning hotels and offices for their command. The Hotel Majestic becomes headquarters. The Ritz soon fills with uniforms instead of artists. You recall stories of how, just a week before, Parisians fled south in droves, clogging the roads with carts, pets and mattresses. Now, those who stayed behind must live with the choice. You stayed too, and now you inhale exhaust from passing lorries and wonder if departure would have been wiser. By evening the German flag is raised at the Eiffel Tower. Rumour spreads that Hitler insisted on visiting Paris at dawn to gaze upon his conquest. Historians still argue whether he truly wanted to stay longer, but his architects say he toured in a single whirlwind morning, preferring to keep Paris intact as a trophy. Some whisper he ordered the city left untouched because he admired its beauty. Others say he wished to reshape Berlin into a grander capital, and Paris merely inspired jealousy. You stand by the Seine and watch the river carry these rumours like drifting debris. Shops along Rue de Rivoli shutter early. A cafe owner mutters that we will serve German officers tomorrow whether he likes it or not. His wife scolds him for speaking too loudly. You notice how quickly people learn caution. A week ago, political debates echoed loudly in cafes. Now, voices drop, glances dart. One ill-chosen word could draw attention. You tuck your chin, suddenly aware of your own speech. The city of light dims itself. Blackout orders arrive swiftly. Every window must be covered, every street lamp shaded. You stumble on uneven pavement because the glow is gone. Historians record how swiftly these measures were enforced, and how Parisians grumbled but complied. Some secretly enjoyed the starry nights returning, but more cursed the stumbles and accidents. As you walk, you hear someone joke that Paris has become a village of owls groping through the dark. Humour feels dangerous, yet necessary. On the bridges, German sentries smoke and laugh among themselves. One sings a folk tune, the words harsh to your ears, yet strangely tender. You wonder, do they feel victorious, or simply tired? Scholars note that many soldiers were amazed by Paris's beauty, snapping photographs and sending postcards. One German wrote to his family, "It feels like walking in a dream." You find bitter irony in that. Your dream has become their postcard. Morning brings the first sight of requisition lists. Notices are pasted on walls, declaring which apartments will be used, which stores must surrender goods. Neighbours cluster around the paper, whispering, frowning, occasionally crossing themselves. A baker near Montmartre sighs as flour is claimed for the occupier's needs. You feel the pang already. Bread, the simplest comfort, may soon be scarce. The line outside his shop lengthens. Some Parisians step into the new reality with startling speed. A hairdresser down the street hangs a sign in German, offering shaves and trims. Another shopkeeper replaces the tricolour in his window with a neutral curtain. You hear someone sneer, "Collabo," collaborationist, under his breath. Yet another voice mutters, "We must survive." Already the city is learning the thin line between pragmatism and betrayal. You continue walking and spot German motorcycles parked outside the Louvre. The museum's doors are closed, its treasures hidden deep in the countryside. Before the invasion, curators quietly evacuated the Mona Lisa, Winged Victory, and hundreds of other works to castle in the Loire. Some scholars debate whether this was foresight or panic, but the fact remains. The Germans find empty walls where masterpieces once hung. You imagine their frustration, and you cannot help but smirk. One small victory, painted on invisible canvases. As dusk falls again, you hear radio static from an apartment window. A family strains to catch words from the BBC, forbidden but irresistible. The announcer's accent cuts through the fuzz, promising that France is not alone. Some argue that such broadcasts offered more hope than real news. Others insist they were lifelines that kept spirits from collapsing entirely. You lean against the cool stone of the building, listening, pretending for a moment that you are not in occupied Paris, but in a free city somewhere else. When you finally drift back to your small apartment, the night presses close. Outside, boots echo on the cobbles, steady as a metronome. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing the city breathe uneasily. The Germans are here, and everything has changed. Tomorrow curfews will be posted. Tomorrow restrictions will multiply. For now, Paris lies silent, caught between the pride of its history and the shadow of its conqueror. You whisper a thought you dare not share aloud. How long will this last? The next morning you find the first notices pasted firmly against the walls, bold black print on white paper, declaring the new rules. Curfew at nightfall. Blackout curtains required. Rationing to begin at once. You lean closer and read the details. Citizens must remain indoors between 11 at night and 5 in the morning. Historians note that, at first, these hours seem generous compared to later restrictions, yet already you feel your freedom tighten. A passerby mutters, "We are prisoners in our own streets." He isn't wrong. You trudge home as the evening bells toll and it feels surreal. Paris, the city that never slept, where cafes once stayed open till dawn, now closes like a convent gate. The Germans patrol with rifles slung, their shadows stretching in the lamplight. You shuffle past quietly, aware that even a sideways glance could be misread. Some scholars argue whether the occupiers were more eager to keep order or to instill fear. Standing here, you sense it hardly matters, the result is the same. In your building, neighbours argue in hushed tones about the blackout. Heavy drapes are scarce, so families stitch blankets together, pinning them against windows. A boy jokes that Paris has become the world's largest cave, and everyone chuckles softly, grateful for the release. But the laughter fades quickly when a German officer knocks on the door across the street, warning that any crack of light risks punishment. You pull your curtain tighter, as if fingers of light could betray you. By day, rationing begins. You receive your first ration card, stamped and dated. Bread, sugar, meat, and even coffee are strictly limited. You line up outside the bakery with dozens of others, the queue curling around the block. A woman ahead of you carries a child on her hip, muttering that the loaf will be gone before her turn. You wonder how long this will last. Some historians note that France received harsher quotas than other occupied countries, partly because much of the harvest was requisitioned for Germany. Others insist French bureaucracy itself slowed distribution. Whatever the reason, you are hungry now, and speculation won't fill your stomach. The bread itself tastes different, rougher, stretched with barley or potato flour. One old man shakes his head and calls it war bread, remembering 1917. You bite into your portion, the crust brittle, the crumb dense. It keeps you alive, yes, but it carries no joy. Butter vanishes quickly. Coffee becomes chicory, thin and bitter. Children beg for sweets, but the shops are barren. In side streets, whispers of the black market spread. Cigarettes here. Real coffee there, but prices are impossibly high for ordinary pockets. You file the thought away. Perhaps one day you will trade for something better. At night you lie awake listening. The city is oddly quiet, only broken by the occasional rumble of a German vehicle or the creak of bicycles carrying patrols. You recall how, just weeks ago, the boulevards glowed with headlights. Laughter spilled from dance halls and the air smelled of roasted chestnuts. Now, only shadows remain. One scholar described it as Paris turning inward, shrinking itself to survive. You feel that inward pull in your own bones. Propaganda joins the restrictions swiftly. Posters bloom across walls like a rash, bright reds and bold slogans, urging loyalty to Marshal Pétain or promising prosperity through obedience. Some feature grinning families around abundant tables, a cruel mockery when you clutch a scrap of bread. Children stare at the images, confused. Adults turn away. Historians argue whether the propaganda truly swayed many Parisians or whether it simply filled the silence with noise. You sense it is the latter. The posters speak, but no one listens. Still, you notice some neighbours adapt quickly. A shopkeeper greets German officers with smiles, practicing halting German words. Another landlord paints over slogans of the Republic, preferring neutrality. People whisper behind their backs, collaborators, but no one speaks too loudly. Everyone knows the Gestapo listens. It's said they use informants in every neighbourhood, and though scholars debate how extensive this network truly was, fear magnifies it. You glance over your shoulder more often, unsure whom to trust. The streets themselves alter. Public clocks are adjusted to German time, 1 hour ahead. You wake later, but the daylight seems out of step with your routine. It feels like even the sun has been requisitioned. On the metro, German officers ride alongside you, their uniforms pressing against the worn coats of Parisians. No one speaks. Silence has become the language of survival. You overhear children in the courtyard playing soldier. Some march stiffly like Germans, others crouch and whisper as resistance fighters. Their parents scold them sharply, too dangerous even as a game. You watch, torn between pride at their spirit and dread for their safety. Some scholars argue that children absorbed the occupation with a strange resilience, turning rules into games. Yet you sense that these small performances carry the weight of future choices. In the market, you notice lines stretching endlessly, baskets empty long before the stalls close. Housewives grumble, trading rumours. More meat is going to Germany, milk shipments are seized, eggs vanish to soldiers' tables. A fishmonger whispers that the Seine yields fewer catches, though some suspect he hides the best for private sales. Distrust seeps into every exchange. You leave with a single turnip, feeling as though you've bartered away a piece of dignity. Even the churches feel different. Priests preach patience, urging prayer for peace. Some quietly defy, slipping words of hope into sermons. Others align openly with Vichy, blessing the marshal and his policies. Historians still debate the church's role, whether it sheltered or betrayed. Sitting in a pew, you feel only the chill of stone and the weight of silence, broken by whispered prayers from weary lips. When curfew strikes again, you hurry home under dim street lamps. The German patrols check papers briskly, their questions sharp but routine. You hold your breath as one soldier scans your card, then waves you through. Relief floods your chest, though you try not to show it. On the corner, you hear a man mutter about being questioned for too long, but his wife hisses at him to hush. Complaints are luxuries you cannot afford. Back in your apartment, you stare at the ration card pinned to the wall. Each square cutout marks not just food, but time passing, life reduced to stamps and cues. You wonder how many weeks, months, or years it will take before the squares run out. You imagine one day peeling the card from the wall, no longer needed, freedom restored. For now it hangs there like a sentence. The city has changed overnight. Once it was about art, romance and leisure. Now it is about rules, cues and shadows. You breathe deeply, trying to remember the taste of real coffee, the sound of midnight laughter, the smell of butter melting on warm bread. Those memories are sustenance of another kind, yet you know memories alone cannot fill an empty stomach. As you close your eyes, you accept the truth. Paris has entered a new rhythm, dictated not by its people, but by the occupier's clock. The morning chill greets you as you step onto the cobblestones, the ration card clutched in hand. The sky is pale, and so are the faces around you, each drawn by hunger into the same long queue outside the bakery. Bread is life now, and life requires patience. You shuffle forward, listening to the quiet grumble of stomachs and shoes scuffing the stones. No one speaks loudly. Words cost energy, and energy is precious. The ration card in your pocket feels almost heavier than coins once did. Each small square promises a crust of survival. Scholars note that the German authorities deliberately restricted supplies to keep the French population subdued, while ensuring their soldiers ate well. Some argue logistics, others insist it was punishment for resistance. You feel none of that nuance as you wait. You only know that your stomach aches, and the loaf at the counter looks smaller every day. When at last you reach the baker, he hands you a dark, coarse loaf. It is more potato than wheat, dense as clay. The smell is faint, almost sour. He shrugs apologetically as though it were his fault the grain has vanished into German warehouses. You nod politely, clutching the bread to your chest as if it were treasure. The irony strikes you. In the city once famed for its cuisine, survival now tastes like cardboard. You wander toward the market square. Lines curl endlessly for vegetables, each stall manned by weary vendors. Today, the offerings are meagre. A handful of wilted carrots, a few turnips, and onions bruised from travel. Housewives haggle fiercely, voices sharp, but the sellers know their power. You overhear one mutter, "Better this than nothing." He's right. You buy a single onion and slip it into your bag beside the loaf. Dinner will be thin, but at least it will exist. Milk is scarce, and children cry for it. Mothers line up before dawn in the hope of receiving a half-litre. The soldiers' families billeted in the city seem to have more. Some scholars question whether the disparity was intentional favouritism or simply better access through army supply chains. You suspect it matters little to the child who licks his lips at the thought of warm milk, but receives only a sip of watered-down substitute. Sugar rations shrink as well. People whisper of recipes that stretch sweetness. Beet syrup boiled until thick, jam made with more apple than berry. One old woman insists that if you close your eyes, chicory brew tastes nearly like coffee. You try it one evening, and the bitterness makes you laugh quietly. "Nearly like coffee," she said. "Nearly is a generous word." You mutter that it tastes like boiled boots, and your neighbour chuckles, one of the rare jokes that lifts the gloom, if only for a moment. The black market grows in the shadows. Behind closed doors, whispers travel. Real butter at this address, a chicken available on that street. Prices are impossible, but desperation drives some to trade. A ring once worn on a finger becomes a slab of bacon. A family heirloom vanishes for a sack of flour. You hear rumours of entire pigs smuggled in carts beneath blankets, and though historians argue how widespread these stories were, you know the hunger that fuels belief. If a pig did appear, it would vanish into dozens of kitchens by nightfall. Children adapt in strange ways. They collect acorns in the park, grinding them into powder for ersatz coffee. They chase stray cats, hoping for a meal, though parents scold them sharply. Yet you see in their eyes a spark of resourcefulness that frightens and inspires. This is no childhood of toys and sweets. This is a childhood of cues and substitutions. Some scholars insist such hardship bred resilience, while others argue it scarred a generation. Watching a boy chew on a crust like leather, you wonder which is true. The Germans themselves seem to dine better. Soldiers are seen eating sausages, their tables laid with butter and cheese. A woman sighs that the invaders eat from France's fields while Parisians gnaw on scraps. It is said that Goering himself sent crates of delicacies back to Germany. Whether rumour or fact, it spreads like wildfire, fueling bitterness in every ration line. You bite your bread harder, tasting not flour, but resentment. At home, meals become rituals of invention. You slice the bread thin to make it last. You fry turnip greens with a splash of oil, pretending it's something grander. Sometimes you spread jam so sparingly it becomes more memory than taste. Families share recipes that disguise scarcity. Potato cakes, carrot steaks, soup stretched with water until it resembles broth more than food. Some even stir sawdust into flour to bulk it out. Historians debate how common this practice was, but you cannot help imagining the grit between teeth. In cafes, the menus shrink. You sit at a table where artists once debated, and now the choice is thin coffee or thinner soup. The waiter shrugs, his tray nearly empty. Yet people still come. Perhaps it is not the food, but the act of sitting, of pretending life continues. A man nearby raises his cup and jokes, "To the invisible roast beef." Everyone chuckles softly, clinging to humour like crumbs. Queues are more than places to wait. They are places to trade information. You hear whispers of arrests, of raids, of hope from the BBC. Women exchange news while clutching ration books. Men mutter about prices rising. Children kick pebbles. Waiting becomes a rhythm of the city, as integral as church bells once were. Some scholars note that rationing redefined social life, forcing strangers into shared suffering. You feel it too. Your neighbours are no longer just neighbours. They are fellow survivors in an endless line. Occasionally the shortages spark conflict. One morning, a quarrel erupts when the bread runs out too soon. Shouts echo across the square until a German patrol appears, and silence falls instantly. People shuffle away, ashamed but still hungry. You walk home with your meagre loaf, realizing that hunger is a sharper weapon than any rifle. At night you sit by a candle and slice your ration with care. You chew slowly, letting the flavour linger as long as possible. The candlelight flickers against the wall, shadows bending with each bite. You think of the feasts once held in these same streets, the markets bursting with cheeses, the cafes offering pastries piled high. Those memories feel like stories from another lifetime. Now bread and onions are luxury enough, and yet somehow Paris endures. The city breathes through its queues, survives through its substitutions, and even manages to laugh at bitter chicory. You swallow the last bite of your crust, sigh and whisper to yourself, tomorrow, another line, another square cut from the ration card. Survival is measured not in days but in crumbs. You wake one morning to find the walls of your neighbourhood transformed overnight. Where yesterday there was bare stone and fading advertisements for theatre shows long since closed, today there are layers of bright posters, each demanding your attention. The colours scream red, white and black, with bold German text you recognise even if you do not understand every word, and beneath it, in French, the message is clear: obey, support, trust. You pause to take it in. A smiling family gathered around a table heavy with bread and wine. A cruel fantasy in a city where you've waited hours for a scrap of potato bread. A soldier depicted as a noble protector, his shadow shielding Paris from some imagined threat. Another poster shows caricatures of enemies, urging Parisians to beware the traitors in their midst. The walls are no longer Parisian. They have become the canvases of Joseph Goebbels' propaganda machine. Scholars still argue how effective these posters really were. Some claim they swayed people, that constant repetition eroded resistance. Others insist Parisians mostly ignored them, rolling their eyes at the exaggerations. Standing here, you feel more insulted than persuaded. The abundance shown on paper mocks the scarcity in your stomach. You glance at the poster again, then at the line forming at the bakery across the street, and the irony nearly makes you laugh. Still, you cannot avoid them. They are everywhere. on lampposts at bus stops, pasted across the doors of closed cinemas. Some are even plastered over church notice boards, as though propaganda itself were the new religion. And the punishment for tearing them down is harsh. So harsh that you would never dare, though you imagine the satisfying rip of paper under your hands. Historians record that resistance groups sometimes painted over them at night, scribbling V for victory across the German slogans. You look closely and yes, faintly in pencil, someone has scrawled a small V at the corner of one. It is enough to make your heart lift, even if only for a moment. Inside a cafe, you overhear a conversation. Two men debate whether to believe the newspapers, now censored and filled with the same tone as the posters. One insists that Marshal Pétain is guiding France wisely, sparing it further ruin. The other mutters that it is all lies, that the Germans print what they please. The truth? Depends who you ask, and perhaps what they are willing to risk saying aloud. You sip your bitter chicory coffee and keep your face neutral. The posters do not just praise German power, they attack enemies. Jews are depicted with cruel exaggerations, their features twisted and grotesque. You feel a shiver, not just of disgust, but of fear, knowing that some neighbours must now walk past these caricatures each day with yellow stars sewn on their coats. Scholars question whether this propaganda swayed public opinion, or merely amplified prejudices already present. You see it wound deeply into the city, an invisible poison that seeps from walls into whispers. One afternoon, you pass the Place de l'Opéra and find a crowd gathered. A large banner unfurls across the building, proclaiming the supposed glory of the Reich. German officers stand nearby, proud of their spectacle. Parisians walk past with blank faces. That blankness itself becomes a form of defiance, neither acceptance nor rebellion, simply endurance. You match their expression, a mask that hides thought, a shield against scrutiny. Children notice the posters too. They ask their parents why the German soldier looks so heroic, why the French man is shown weak. Parents fumble for answers, muttering about drawings being just drawings. Yet you can see the seeds being sown. Historians debate whether children absorb the propaganda more readily, or whether their natural suspicion of adults kept them immune. Watching a boy trace the outline of a German soldier on a poster with his finger, you feel the danger all the same. The cinema joins the campaign. Movie posters now display German films, comedies, romances, even newsreels glorifying victories on the Eastern Front. You duck into a theatre one evening, desperate for escape, only to find yourself trapped beneath flickering images of soldiers marching to triumphant music. Some in the audience clap politely, others sit stone-faced. You wonder whether the clapping is genuine or merely survival. You lean back in your seat and let your eyes close, pretending for a few minutes that you are anywhere else. Back on the street you notice resistance graffiti appearing more boldly. A cross of Lorraine chalked on a wall, a tiny tricolour painted in a corner. They do not last long. German patrols scrape them off swiftly, but the traces linger in your mind. Scholars note how such small acts became vital symbols, reminders that not everyone believed the propaganda. You smile quietly at the memory of one daring night, when someone altered a poster's slogan by adding just 2 words, twisting praise into ridicule. Yet the flood of paper never stops. New posters cover the old, slogans change with each passing month. One week they promise abundance, the next they warn of enemies, the next they boast of victories abroad. The city walls become a battlefield of words and images. You realise that every brick is enlisted, every surface turned into a weapon. Paris itself has been conscripted into the propaganda war. At home, you try to shut it out. You close your curtains, focus on your bread and thin soup. But even in your apartment stairwell, posters hang, reminding you of rationing rules, warning against listening to foreign radio, urging loyalty to the new order. You feel cornered by paper. It rustles in your dreams, its colours bleed into your thoughts. And yet, despite the flood, a quiet resistance grows. People mock the posters in whispers, inventing jokes about the exaggerated smiles and endless promises. One neighbour calls them fairy tales for hungry children. You chuckle softly, careful not to let the laughter reach the street. Because you know, laughter itself is dangerous. As days pass, you learn to walk past the propaganda without looking. Your eyes slide over it, your mind blocks the message. Some scholars claim this became a skill of survival, seeing without seeing. You perfect it, like so many others. Still, every so often, your gaze catches a detail, a clenched fist, a bright loaf of bread, a smile too wide, and you remember how fragile the line is between persuasion and despair. Paris, once a city of posters for art exhibits, plays and music, now speaks in one voice, the occupiers. You trace your hand along the cold stone wall beneath a layer of paper, feeling the roughness beneath. The wall is older, stronger, it will outlast the glue. You whisper to yourself that one day reposters will peel, the walls will breathe again, and the city will speak its own words once more. The cafe door creaks as you push it open, and the familiar aroma of roasted beans, or rather their chicory stand-in, wraps around you. Café de Flore, once buzzing with writers and philosophers, feels smaller now, dimmed by shortages and surveillance. The marble tables are still here, the curved banquettes still hold patrons, but the atmosphere is different. You slide into a seat, your back to the wall, and notice the low murmur of conversations has shifted into careful whispers. A waiter approaches, his tray almost bare. "Café?" he asks, his voice flat. You nod, and soon a small cup is set before you. The liquid inside is dark, thin, bitter. You take a sip anyway, grateful for the illusion. Around you, others cradle their cups as if they hold warmth beyond the liquid. One man dips his crust of bread into the chicory, softening the hardness. He sighs with satisfaction, not because it tastes good, but because it tastes like habit. At the next table, 2 German soldiers sit in pressed uniforms, their rifles resting against the wall. They talk loudly in their own language, and their laughter cuts through the room like broken glass. You glance away, but your ears catch every word. Some locals stare at their cups, pretending not to hear. Others dart nervous glances toward them. The presence of the occupiers is constant, even here in this place of supposed refuge. Historians note that Parisian cafés became strange crossroads during the occupation part haven, just part stage, part trap. German officers came for leisure, Parisians came for routine, and sometimes whispers of resistance pass beneath the clink of cups. You shift in your chair, wondering what stories are hiding in this very room. The waiter returns with a tray for the soldiers. Their plates hold real butter and slices of sausage. Your stomach tightens at the sight. How do they obtain such luxuries when you wait in queues for turnips? Some scholars argue that German supply lines funneled resources into soldiers' bellies, while Parisians were deliberately left wanting. Others say the Wehrmacht raided the best stocks before locals even saw them. You don't need a scholar to explain the injustice. You can see it on the table beside you. A woman in a smart suit sits near the window. Her lipstick is bold, her hair carefully waved. She leans toward one of the soldiers, speaking French with a smile. He answers clumsily in her tongue, and they both laugh. The other patrons watch from the corners of their eyes. Whispers like collaboratrice and horizontal float through the air. You feel a mixture of disdain and pity. Disdain for her choices, pity for what survival sometimes demands. Historians debate how many women willingly fraternized and how many were coerced by hunger or fear. Watching her slip a sausage from his plate into a handbag, you wonder which truth belongs to her. Near the back, a pair of students hunch over notebooks. One sketches quickly, his pencil scratching, while the other murmurs lines of poetry. Their voices are low, yet you catch fragments about freedom and fire. Are they merely students, or are they part of something larger, something whispered and dangerous? You sip your chicory slowly, pretending not to notice, but your ears lean toward them all the same. The German soldiers laugh again, louder this time. One slaps the other on the shoulder, nearly knocking over his rifle. The room stiffens, silence falling for a breath, then slowly conversation resumes. You realise that this is how life now works. Fear tightens every interaction, then people pretend nothing happened. Scholars still argue whether such daily accommodations were cowardice or resilience. Sitting here, you decide it is simply survival. The cafe itself wears the occupation like a tired coat. Once shelves overflowed with newspapers, now only censored copies sit neatly in a rack, their headlines triumphing German victories. You pick one up, scanning the words: victories in Russia, promises of a new Europe, boasts of order and prosperity. You fold it quickly, leaving it unread. Truth feels absent in these pages, and the act of reading this feels like swallowing dust. Outside the window, you spot posters once again. Bright slogans pasted on stone. They promise plenty, they warn of enemies. Their colours shine in the daylight, but their words are hollow. You glance back inside at the dim cafe, at the hollow eyes of the patrons, and the contrast nearly makes you smile. Paris sees the truth, even if it pretends not to. The waiter, weary but defiant, slips a note into a patron's hand. You catch the movement out of the corner of your eye, subtle as a shadow. The patron nods, tucks it into his pocket and finishes his drink. Perhaps it is just a grocery list, or perhaps it is something else. Historians record how cafes often became informal hubs for resistance, where notes passed in baguettes or under saucers. You wonder whether you've just witnessed history moving quietly through everyday gestures. As the soldiers finish their meal, they toss coins onto the table, German marks, not francs. The waiter collects them without a word. The soldiers stand, their boots clattering, and step back into the street. A collective exhale fills the room, though no one comments. The absence of their laughter feels like music. You linger a little longer, staring into your empty cup. The chicory dregs cling stubbornly to the porcelain. The taste still lingers on your tongue, bitter, woody, sharp. You think back to real coffee, its aroma filling the air, its warmth carrying conversations late into the night. That taste feels like another lifetime, and you wonder if you will ever know it again. When you finally rise, the cafe door opens onto the Boulevard Saint-Germain. The sunlight is pale, the posters bright, the street restless with bicycles and ration queues. But for a brief hour you were part of the ritual, part of the fragile defiance that keeps Paris breathing. You step back into the city with one thought lingering. Even under watchful eyes, even sipping bitter substitutes, Paris still gathers at its tables, still whispers its stories, still remembers who it is. You stroll along the boulevard Haussmann and notice that the windows, though still dressed in silk and lace, conceal secrets of their own. Paris, even under occupation, remains the capital of fashion. Yet, it is not the same fashion as before. Scarcity has forced ingenuity, and you see it in every hemline, every sleeve, every tilted hat. The women of Paris, determined not to let the occupier dull their spirit, have become magicians with needle and thread. With wool requisitioned, cotton scarce, and silk redirected to Germany, they invent substitutes. Skirts are shortened not for style but for fabric conservation, yet they carry themselves with elegance, as if necessity were the latest design. You pass a young woman whose coat has been patched from two older garments, seams showing faintly, yet her posture makes it look intentional. She walks with her chin high, daring the world to call it anything less than chic. Historians note that these adaptations became a quiet act of defiance. The Germans controlled the city, but they could not control style. Some scholars argue that Parisian fashion under occupation was not merely survival, but resistance, a way of saying, "We will not become drab for you." Standing here, watching women stride down the boulevard in homemade creations, you believe it. Shoes tell another story. Leather is nearly impossible to find, and many walk in wooden soles strapped with canvas. The clatter of wood on pavement becomes a soundtrack of the city. Children giggle at the sound, calling them clogs, though adults grimace at the blisters they cause. One man jokes in line at the bakery that Parisians now march like soldiers even when they don't want to. The laughter spreads quickly, the humour cutting through hunger like a warm knife through butter. If only butter were still within reach. Accessories, once frivolous, become declarations. With silk stockings gone, women draw lines up the backs of their legs with pencil to mimic seams. You glimpse one such pair of legs on the metro and marvel at the precision. It is both tragic and triumphant, a sign of what is lost and what will not be surrendered. Perfume too lingers faintly, though bottles grow rarer. A dab behind the ear, a spray on a scarf. It is more than fragrance, it is a memory of normalcy. Magazines continue to publish, though censored, their pages thinner, their colours duller. Yet within them are sketches of dresses designed with rationing in mind. Clever folds, detachable collars, coats that can be reversed for variety. You see women in queues clutching these magazines, studying them as though they contain secrets to survival. Perhaps they do. Historians still debate whether these designs were acts of compliance with the occupier's demands or sly affirmations of Paris's cultural leadership. You, watching a seamstress in a doorway pinning a collar with expert hands, sense it is the latter. Men too adapt. Suits wear thin, cuffs fray, but they mend carefully, pressing their jackets to keep dignity intact. Hats become more common, a way to hide weariness or disguise a patched crown. You pass a group of young men leaning against a wall, their trousers narrowed because fabric is scarce, but they stand as if they were models. Even when the world shrinks to ration cards and curfews, appearance remains a weapon of pride. The Germans notice. Some officers comment on the elegance of Parisian women, admiring their poise even in patched garments. Others find it unsettling, as though Paris refuses to surrender its soul. Scholars record that German authorities attempted to claim Parisian fashion for themselves, funneling couture into Berlin, staging shows for propaganda. Yet the real show happens in the streets, in the queues, in the quiet resilience of women drawing seams on their legs. You recall hearing of Coco Chanel still living at the Ritz, navigating the murky waters of collaboration and survival. Some call her opportunist, others accuse her of far worse. Historians argue endlessly about her choices, but you see the irony clearly. While the occupiers dine in luxury above, ordinary women stitch dresses from curtains below. Survival wears many fabrics. One afternoon you step into a small boutique. The shelves are sparse, but the seamstress greets you warmly. She shows you a scarf she has dyed from beetroot skins, the colour a soft rose. She smiles proudly, and you cannot help but smile back. This is not merely fabric, it is defiance dyed into cloth. You purchase it, though your ration of francs dwindles. When you wrap it around your neck later, it feels lighter than silk and heavier than pride. At markets, women trade patterns as if they were currency. This hem saves a metre, one says. This cut uses scraps for pockets, another replies. You listen, fascinated. They are generals in a war of fabric, waging battles with scissors instead of rifles. Some scholars later describe this as fashion diplomacy, a negotiation with scarcity itself. Watching them argue over buttons and thread, you find the term fitting. Yet fashion is not only about clothing, it is about spirit. You recall a young girl skipping across the street in a patched dress, ribbons tied in her hair. Her smile is radiant, her steps light. Sleep now. Let yourself sink deeper into that perfect relaxation. Your eyelids are heavy. So heavy it would take too much effort to open them now. Your limbs feel pleasantly weighted, impossible to move even if you wanted to, which you don't. You just want to drift all the way down into deep, restful sleep. That's it. Just let go completely. The day is done. The work is finished. Nothing more required of you now except to rest, to renew, to dream perhaps of different possibilities, different worlds. But for now, just sleep deep and peaceful, easy and calm. Sleep now. Sleep well. Drifting deeper with each breath down and down into perfect, complete rest.